Hi, Juan here. Today I'm taking a look at some biodynamic headphones, the Creative Arbonne Live SE, the special edition, with the nice paint, and the Emu Teak. Now, both of these are really special headphones in their own way. I covered the Cal before, but I prefer this sort of look on it. Otherwise, it's functionally the same. And both the Cal and the Cal SE are effectively miniaturized versions of these higher-end models based on the original Denon D5000 and D7000 variants. This is an Emu Teak with, well, obviously teak cups and detachable 2.5mm cables. And this has to be one of my favorite headphones. It really takes the general idea of the Cal to, kind of elevates it and refines it a lot. However, there's $400 or $500 separating the two, and so I want to see if it's worth it. Well, that's what I want to talk about. So for starters, if you don't know about the Cal, it's a really nice value U-shaped response headphone. It uses a Foster's 40mm biodynamic drivers, and just like every other headphone in this range, and this is the general concept, just because this one's a little bit bigger. The general idea is that in the rear chamber you have a solid cup, that would increase back wave pressure and the restorative force on the driver. So as the driver pushes back, you have the air compressing in the rear chamber, and then that places restorative force on the driver, pushing it back to its original place. And that helps give you that sense of impact. And it also, I find that it does resonate just a little bit in the low end in a really nice way, just because of the wood material. But in between this rear cup and the front chamber, there is also a secondary, almost looks like a baffle, but there is a vent across the whole thing that controls that low end response. And the same thing can be found here in the Cal. There is a vent. It looks like a second baffle here, right underneath the pads if you take the thing apart. And then both of them have in the cups surrounding the driver a foam piece that reduces resonance. It's larger on the Teak and the other models than the Cal, but same idea. And so, with that acoustic principle in mind, both of these act very similarly in a lot of ways, to the point where some people, after buying something like a THX100 or TH600 or Denon D5000 or Emu Teak, they would go and try the Cal and say, well, what am I paying all this money for? And that's a fair assessment, because both of these are really similar headphones in a lot more ways than you think. But there's also some differences. So, in regards to similarity, both of these are excellent, just really impactful, fun headphones. Both of them have a good sense of imaging. It's a smooth mid-range, maybe a recessed upper mids, and in general, fun, laid-back sound signature. It's not overly aggressive, especially on the Teak, and it's just really pleasant to listen to. Now, where the Teak starts to differ, and where a lot of people, I think, miss the differences, is really in two things: the microdynamics, as some might call it, and the sheer impact force of the driver, the way it handles the low end. Now, from an immediate listen, if you're just grabbing these two and comparing them, and maybe that's all you care about, you might actually ask yourself, why would this cost more than this? And although I don't think the price on the Teak, just right off the bat, would be fully justified, there is some things going on here. So, first off, from my experience, after using both of these for a very long time, I noticed that the Teak has just a little bit more of that microdynamics, a little bit more detail in there. The transients are just a little bit smoother, although similar. I just kind of feel just a little bit more of that tactility to it. As there's less of a there's less of a sort of sheen over the sound, and kind of really brings to life those little details in the dynamic range. And then as well, you're dealing with a 50 millimeter biodynamic driver in a much larger rear cavity. So, just for example, and the Cal in a way can pull this off, but not in the same way. I was watching Altered Carbon, and when the soundtrack really started hitting in the sub bass, these made me feel like I was in a theater with a subwoofer going out at me, and you really can't pull that off with a smaller displacement driver. I mean, the sense of slam that you get when this thing can really get wrung out, whew, man, there's a lot there. And I think it's just those little things like that. The imaging is better, and then the tonality. The high end is less harsh. The low end, especially mid bass, is more controlled than the Teak, and actually the other Fostex TH600 based models. And it's just those little things that kind of make it worth it in a way. And then, not to mention this beautiful wood cup, which is probably what you're paying the most money for, as Teak is apparently pretty rare. But regardless, this is a really great headphone that holds its own. And to answer the question, is it worth the money? Well, that's up to your priorities. Because if you're not willing to pay for those minute technicalities, or the same, if you don't care too much about how the bass impacts and how you feel it reverberate on your skull, I mean, this in a way will do it, but it's not the same. And I guess that's the name of the game. Finding what you really like and weighing whether a huge increases in prices higher on headphones is worth it for you. And with that in mind, I think I'll hold on to my Teak for a while longer. But like many things, there's no definitive answer. The Cal is only $50. You're getting a really high quality driver. The bass impact, the smooth mid-range tonality, and then when you EQ it too, it's great. But it's not a Teak. And I guess that's all there is to it. Lovely headphones. I mean, honestly, if I were to pick one, obviously the Teak, even if it's a lot more expensive, but at the same time, I mean, there's a reason why I own both. Taking something like the Teak outside is a really bad idea, but with this, I can do some yard work with it, not worry about it too much. So, again, priorities. Definitely, if you haven't, take a look at either of these, especially the Cal since it's so available. I don't think anyone should go without experiencing at least one of the Foster memes in their life. And if you enjoy bass, I mean, you get bass. That's all for today. Or for this video. See ya.